The views expressed on this program are not necessarily those of WTJX, its board, staff, or underwriters.
On this episode of Comes with the Territory, the 6th Constitutional Convention will be on the ballot this November. It represents the territory's latest effort to draft the Constitution after 5 failed attempts. UVI professor Dr. Malik Sekou is here to break down the topic and explain why all local voters should care. Plus, just weeks into the new school year, education officials appeared before lawmakers to address a series of safety and maintenance issues in the territory's public schools. Issues from unsanitary conditions to faulty, dangerous equipment sparked student protests, teacher walkouts, and urgent demands for action from parents. We'll have the details. And later, this week's panel joins the conversation to analyze these political issues and more. Comes with the Territory starts now. Welcome to Comes with the Territory. I'm Jeanette Millen-Young, sitting in for Leslie Commission. In the November 5th general election, local voters will elect delegates for the territory's 6th Constitutional Convention, an important step in the decades-long effort to shape the future governance of the territory. Here's more.
Bill number 34-0153, an act establishing the 6th Constitutional Convention of the Virgin Islands and providing for an appropriation to cover convention-related expenses as amended, has been approved by this body and will be sent to the governor for further consideration.
In December of 2022, the 34th legislature passed a bill to establish the 6th Constitutional Convention of the Virgin Islands, and it was signed into law in January of 2023. This officially set the stage for the territory's 6th attempt at drafting a constitution. The previous 5 conventions, dating back to 1964, all failed due to conflicts between local and federal requirements. Notably, Congress rejected the 5th Constitutional Convention largely because of controversial provisions, including proposed tax exemptions for ancestral Virgin Islanders. In the upcoming general election, voters will select 7 delegates from St. Croix, 7 delegates from St. Thomas, and 1 at-large delegate from St. John to be seated as members of the 6th Constitutional Convention, which is scheduled to convene in January 2025. The delegates will have the option to draft a new constitution, revise the 5th Constitution's draft, or incorporate parts of the revised Organic Act of 1954 into the proposed constitution. Before taking effect, the proposed constitution must receive approval from the United States Congress and be signed by the President of the United States. Joining the show to provide expert insight is Dr. Malik Sekou, Professor of Political Science and History at the University of the Virgin Islands and Project Director for UVI's Office of Self-Determination and Constitutional Development. Welcome, Dr. Sekou.
I'm pleased to be here.
You are the eminent expert with everything that has to do with the Constitutional Convention here. And it dates back to how long now?
Well, I wouldn't say eminent. I would say I'm the engaging expert.
Okay.
I believe I've inherited a role from other very worthy people. One of the greater experts would be Dr. Paul Leary, who was a pioneering professor at UVI during the 1980s. And he provided advice on how to deal with the issue. And I think I kind of picked up the baton and ran with it since then.
So what would you say is the actual purpose of it all? Because a lot of people, even though there's been a lot of public awareness programs, everybody still doesn't know. So what would you say is the actual purpose of the Constitutional Convention and ultimately the Constitution?
Well, first, a constitution is a framework of government. It is like a plan, a house plan. In any house that you live in the Virgin Islands, there's something that is written, a architectural design that lays out the government, lays out the property. In our case, the Constitution lays out the government in terms of separation of powers, the duties of elected officials, responsibilities of legislators, governors, judges, and so forth. So it's a house plan, a plan for the government a plan for governance, a plan for the people.
So in absence of this document, this constitution, do you think that's what is affecting our governance at this point?
Well, first, we do have a de facto constitution called the Revised Organic Act of 1954. This is a constitutional document or a framework that was given to us by Congress in 1954. It has been revised at least 8 times. It has been improved 8 times. But in the 1960s, our foremothers decided that we need to revise the Revised Organic Act and give us more power. And from 1964 onward, there's been a process of seeking to revise the Revised Organic Act. I notice you use the word failed attempts. I would say they are incomplete attempts. That means they were like a baseball player. They hit line drives, but they never ran across the bases.
So you say, you have an objection to the word failed, and then there are other people in the community who basically say, well, we have a constitution, so it didn't fail either. That's what they say. I mean, what do you say in rebuttal to those type of comments?
It's an incomplete situation. The Organic Act that we have is a work in progress. It is something that is not completely consecrated unless the public, the people of the Virgin Islands, vote in mass, vote as a majority of people and decide that this document is ours. What we have is something that serves the Constitution, but it doesn't have our blessing as a people. And all we're doing right now in the 6th attempt is to draft something, whether it's a revise of the revision that's in front of us or adopt something that can serve as a people's document that we have voted on, we have ratified and made our own.
So I want to talk about the process of the election of the delegates, but before I go there, I wanted to, at the very least, have people understand the importance as to how having this document ties into our everyday lives, because I guess people don't understand that part.
Well, the most important part about a document of this magnitude is that it places the burden and responsibility of governance on us. There's a mindset in the Virgin Islands for us to look to the federal government, look abroad for some kind of a federal savior, a federal entity coming to resolve WAPA, our building problems, housing problems, our infrastructure. We have this dependency mindset that somebody outside of the Virgin Islands will come and solve it. By us having our own constitution, the center of gravity comes to us. It becomes our responsibility to govern ourselves. And that's the most important thing about the Constitution.
So we have 7 positions open in St. Thomas and 7 in St. Croix, 1 at large. But the election coming up, we only have 4 persons running in St. Thomas. So what do you think that is?
Several things. Some people believe it's because St. Thomas has a seat of power, we are happy, or it could be that there's a lack of engagement. The St. Thomian population might be somewhat comfortable so far with the arrangement of the political system. Our Crucian brethren have the greatest concern because they can see how the way the configuration of power is. Here is a seat of government, St. Thomas. St. Croix is somewhat looking from the outside in. So they have a greater desire to have a say in this process.
So since the ballot has only 4 persons in St. Thomas, what's going to happen to the next 3 slots that are open? How will that be decided?
Well, there can be a special election. I think that's one solution. Or the governor can recommend people. I think he can do that. Or the Senate president. I really don't know what's going to be the solution, but I suspect there's going to be some special consideration. I would advise that there'll be a special election. We need to have 15 people who are all elected or brought into this position the same way. There has to be a sense of equality and normalcy. If you handpick certain people, now it'd be a problem. Now, ironically, when I wrote my presentation 3 years ago, I supported a mixed approach where some seats are elected and some are selected, but it was opposed.
So if they do have a special election, I think that there will be interruption in the process as to how it should flow because the delegates are supposed to be seated in January. So if they have a special election, what about write-in? Can somebody write in names and somebody gets 5 votes? It's by plurality, correct?
Yes. The only name they can't write in is my name. I'm going to request them to write my name in.
right.
But yes, a write-in campaign, just like we have in our election system a runoff component, it is possible that the Board of Election can have a meeting and decide to open up some positions in a runoff dynamic. Like within 2 weeks, there are vacancies, please select people.
Okay.
That could happen.
So once seated, what do you think about the options, or not that you, I know you know, so not what you think. What are those options that these delegates have before them once they're seated, and the length of the process?
Well, there's an easy way, there's a moderate way, and there's the difficult way. I call it the long drive in Texas in a pink Cadillac. The easiest way for the Virgin Islands people is to adopt the Revised Organic Act with its amendments first. You use what you have. As soon as you get that document approved through Congress and it's ratified among the Virgin Islands voters, then you turn around and revise it. Then you have a series of amendments in which all the issues that we think are wise, all the issues that are meaningful to this modern population, we seek to adopt them in the future.
With that one option, the delegates would have a very short period of time to work,
Yes,
right? Because
yes.
once it's approved, then it's dissolved. And so when you're talking about revisions, the revisions will then go back to the elected officials.
It doesn't have to be resolved. They could, the legislature, the 36th legislature, hopefully, could seek to revise the process so that there's an extension. And after let's assume the Revised Organic Act of 1954 is approved with amendments, there is a procedure in which there are a series of amendments that will take effect in 2026, 2027.
Okay, so you mentioned one option and I interrupted you. What are the other two options?
Other two options is to try to cut and paste, to take aspects of the previous constitutional documents and merge it into one document. But that's like making sausage. That's a difficult task. But it could be done. Some of the people who are running for this position in St. Croix are very gifted. There are attorneys who are running. And I believe once there's a will, there's a way. Rather, say it wrong. Once there's a will to change this, they'll find a way to make it happen. The most difficult task is to start from zero.
Yeah.
If we try to reinvent the wheel, it'll take us 10 years.
And the third option?
That's the
third option
The third
there.
option is start from zero, from
Start
scratch.
from zero is the third option.
That's not wise.
So for anyone listening at this very moment, what would you say to them? Make sure to go and vote for this position, because a lot of times people just think about the senatorial or the gubernatorial. What would you tell them on this day? Go out to vote because this matters. Why?
Well, I would add that even though a constitution isn't a very popular topic, it's not the bread and butter issues. It deals with the political system. Many Virgin Islanders are concerned about a lack of transparency, a lack of accountability, a lack of responsiveness. This constitutional discussion tackles this in a big way. It deals with a big question. How do we have a system that works for us? We, the VI people, must wrap our arms around the Constitution, make it ours. There will be nobody from the states coming to solve this problem for us. We have to do it ourselves. And it has to be done now.
So you would say one of the big topics, people will say, well, I don't want to vote because no matter who you vote for, it's the same thing. But those who are drafting the Constitutional Convention can really redesign how we elect our governor and lieutenant governor. Do they come elected as a pair? Are they elected separately? How many senators? Once again, all of that could be part of the Constitution.
So you're making me talk now.
Okay.
In this, in the second convention in 1970-71, there was a proposal to have an elected attorney general. There was also a proposal for municipal councils. I would say, for those of us who are not pleased with the way the attorney general office is run, we could say, let us consider an elected attorney general. Let's consider maybe an elected judge. Let us expand the court. So there's the bankruptcy judges, probation, not probation, for dealing with the land issue.
Probate.
Probate, that's correct. Expanded probate judges. because I know the probate issue is a hot issue for many local families concerning land. We could also deal with the issue of mayors. That came out in the third convention. Do we want to have mayors? Do we want to have municipal councils? We can find creative ways to address our local issues by putting it in the new constitution.
Well, a mouthful, but hopefully you have convinced more people who weren't thinking about going out to vote for this that they will vote for it. But really, that's all the time that we have right now. We really thank you for having spent some time with us, and hope you convince some people. Coming up, we'll hear from this week's panel. But first, let's take a look at the topics for discussion.
No student, absolutely no student, should be put at risk when attending school. We understand the gravity of this situation, and we apologize on behalf of the entire Department of Education, as well as the School Bureau of Construction and Maintenance, to the students, the families, and the community as well.
The Education Commissioner's apology came during a recent Senate hearing to address various issues plaguing the territory's public schools, just weeks into the new school year. The disturbing incident that prompted the public apology happened at the St. Croix Educational Complex on September 5th. A student was transported to the hospital with serious injuries after a ceiling fan fell inside a classroom.
We need to be safe at school. Ceiling fans cannot be dropping.
The next day, students protested, calling attention to dangerous and unsanitary conditions on campus.
Classrooms have mold. We still don't have any AC up until now. The heat is unbearable, and we don't have water in the bathrooms. We have to go in the bathroom and pee over people's pee, poop over people's poop. It is horrible. They've told us that they're going to change stuff.
Education officials told lawmakers of a change made following the ceiling fan injury, specifically regarding the contractor, William Trinidad, doing business as K&J Services.
Every fan that particular contractor install, we take them down, we look over them, make sure that he did everything he was supposed to do, and apparently he did not. So we have another set that this same contractor installed in Central High. We're about to remove all those fans this afternoon, take all his work out, and suspend him from doing any work till further investigation.
2 weeks before the ceiling fan injury, there was a school bus accident on St. Croix that sent multiple students to the hospital. Education officials said that the bus was carrying students from 3 public schools when it was hit by another vehicle on August 21st. Some parents expressed frustration on social media, accusing the department of mismanaging the incident and failing to communicate properly. The Education Commissioner responded with a video message.
This incident highlights the need for the department to enhance protocols when contracting vendors who provide critical services to our students. While accidents are often unforeseen, VIDE must ensure that parents are notified promptly and that decisions are made in the best interest of our students and families.
At the Senate hearing, education officials detailed the department's next steps.
We have been working furiously in our investigation of the school bus accident. We've had statements from all principals. We have worked very closely with the bus company. The commissioner herself interviewed the bus management, and we will have that information for you and what the next steps are going forward in terms of school bus management accident policies.
Education officials spoke about the next steps at Charlotte Amalie High School on St. Thomas, where students and teachers walked out of classes on August 29th due to unbearable conditions, including non-functional air conditioning units and mold. A WTJX newsfeed correspondent visited the school that morning and described the conditions in a radio broadcast.
When you walk into those rooms, you are hit with the reek of mold. It is this overpowering smell that you walk into, that your eyes start itching. You can feel it in your throat. And I was in, 5 different classrooms for 5 minutes each. These are conditions that these guys are in all day long.
Education officials acknowledged the issues soon after the walkout, stating a contractor was on site to address the air conditioning issues and that mold remediation teams were scheduled to begin work. At the Senate hearing, the Education Commissioner discussed a long-term plan for mold in the schools.
At no time is it our intention to have staff and students in moldy environments. Our modular units will have to be monitored closely and remediated on a case-by-case basis. The School Maintenance and Construction Bureau will devise a long-term plan to address the modulars across the territory.
The deteriorating state of the territory's public schools has brought scrutiny to the newly established Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance, which was created through legislation to focus on school upkeep. Lawmakers at the Senate hearing also raised concerns about the Bureau's Executive Director, Craig Benjamin. Senator Samuel Carrion noted that Benjamin did not meet the basic qualifications for the role.
Are you a licensed architect?
No, I'm not, sir.
Are you a licensed engineer?
No, I'm not, sir.
Do you know that Act 8717 establishes that the Bureau is managed by an executive director appointed by the governor who must be either an architect or engineer licensed? And you don't possess none of those two.
No, sir.
That's the problem that we have. We move legislation and this administration decides what to implement, what to execute, when to do it, when not to do it. And it starts from the top all the way down.
The legislation that created the Bureau specifies that the executive director appointed by the governor must be either a licensed architect or engineer. However, the job description posted by the government online did not include this license requirement.
Based on the law that was passed in the 34th legislature, and based on what you applied for, based on whoever in government house sent out, you're kind of an illegal hire based on the law. You applied for what you saw, and you had all right to, being that you're seeing that you fit the category, but it doesn't fit what the laws prescribe. And I don't know where we're going to go with that. But these are the problems that continues to just bother me with the administration, how they just circumvent what the lawmakers put in place and send out wrong information.
School Maintenance Bureau Director Craig Benjamin joined Education Commissioner Dion Wells-Hedrington and other department officials at a PTO meeting on September 10th. The mother of the student injured by a falling ceiling fan demanded solutions, not apologies.
What could have happened to my child? You know what he said to me? Mom, the fan has been shaken from the time school started. He said the teacher reported it more than once. He said if I didn't move to the side, it would have been my neck. My son got injured, and thanks to God that he was protecting him, he didn't die. Today, I'm not here to hear, oh, I'm sorry. I'm here to get solutions.
Commissioner Wells-Hedrington acknowledged the need for accountability and stressed the need to prioritize funding for school maintenance and repairs. She noted that the new Bureau of School Maintenance now has increased funding and purchasing power to address these issues.
It has to be a budgeted priority for us to sustain our schools. You can't do the impossible with limited funding. One of the things that the Bureau has been afforded with that Mr. Milligan and the rest of the maintenance team has not is the fact that he has purchasing power up to $1 million. We've never had that in the Department of Education before. In addition to that, he now has a budget of $12 million when this man functioned off of $1 million for over 15 years. So if we're going to be real, $1 million cannot take care of our maintenance concerns in this district. But that's what we've been functioning on. So now it's a brighter day, and I'm looking forward to more improvements out of the Bureau now that this additional money has surfaced, and there's a commitment from our legislators to put that money back in.
Joining me on set to break it all down is social media content creator Gabrielle Gerard, who is also a former teacher. From our St. Croix studio, let's welcome Jamila Russell, the voice behind the long-running political radio show Just Jamila on WXTX AM 970, and prominent local attorney Key Walker, owner of the Walker Legal Group. Welcome to the show, everyone, and let's get into the present issues of the day. Before that, I want to quickly get your thoughts on the featured discussions about the Constitutional Convention, and we can start with Attorney Walker. What are your impressions of what you heard earlier from Dr. Sekou?
I don't really disagree with anything that Dr. Sekou said. I advocate for adopting the revised Organic Act and going from there. I don't see the need at this point, after we've had so many constitutional conventions, to try to create a document from scratch or create a document from one of the prior drafts of one of the prior conventions. At this point, we've been operating under the revised Organic Act. Our laws are based on the revised Organic Act. Let's just work with that and then amend it to add any additional language that we value here in the Virgin Islands.
So do you have any confidence that basically one of the key issues with ancestral rights, do you have any confidence that there'll be any change in this with this group of elected leaders?
I can't say that's difficult to predict, but what I can predict is that if it continues to be included in the drafts, it will continue to be rejected by the federal government.
What are your thoughts, Ms. Gerard?
I agree with Attorney Walker in that I don't think that reinventing the wheel is a great approach to this. I like the idea of including voices of past Virgin Islanders in the conversation. I'll also say that I think maybe it pertains to the ancestral rights of Virgin Islanders, I think where the challenge comes is in the verbiage. I think that the verbiage has to be crafted in a way that it does not look discriminatory. And so I think that that's actually one of the many obstacles that our new convention is gonna have to face.
Very good. What about you, Jamila? What are you thinking?
Well, I think having worked on the Constitutional Convention bill, I think it's disheartening that more young people aren't running to become a delegate to the Constitution, because it tells you where the importance of this document lies. Many of the convention delegates are retirees, and that may be because young people would have to take a leave of absence from work to be able to be on the ballot. But most, if not all, of the candidates for the 6th Constitutional Convention are retirees, people who have been involved in the community for a long time. And that doesn't lend to new voices or new ideas or new verbiage, as Ms. Karad said, to be able to be included in this Constitutional Convention. So I don't know that, and I can't speak to the success of the 6th Constitutional Convention. However, I think that we face a challenge in that the law hasn't been met because we don't have the full complement of candidates from the St. Thomas, St. John district. So I don't know that the Constitutional Convention will be able to be seated come January if you don't have the full complement of 15. So it begs the question as to whether or not we need legislation to postpone this, educate people on the importance of the Constitutional Convention, and then create the environment where more young people can become involved in the process. Because right now, there's a lack of involvement.
So Jamila, when I asked Dr. Sekou about it, he said write-in is an option. So is plurality. So if somebody is written in 5 times, that they can be seated as well.
I don't know that there isn't any language in the bill that I recall that allows for that or says that write-in candidates, if you have one person who's written in, that you win a seat on the Constitutional Convention by one vote, one write-in vote. So I'm not an attorney. I'm not the sister with ESQ behind her name. So I'm sure that there will be some legal challenges mounted on that end.
Okay, so we'll move on. We'll leave that one right there, Jamila. We'll go to one of the topics that I'd like to discuss that we talked about in the packages before. A ceiling fan fell in a classroom and it seriously injured a student at the St. Croix Educational Complex on September 5th. So you're a former teacher, Ms. Gerard. What are your thoughts on what happened there?
It's honestly really frustrating because I recognize that our schools have a lot of challenges, and I have a lot of sympathy for the leaders in place who have inherited a very monumental problem. And I also think that in areas where we could be proactive, we're extremely reactive. And unfortunately, when we are reactive, it is our vulnerable populations that feel it the most, our elders and our children. And this is just another example. And I think it's the canary in the coal mine that we're seeing here, that if we don't pull it together and we don't prioritize the health of students, the safety of students, the learning environments that our students are in, I think we're going to be seeing more of these problems unfold, especially when you consider how long it takes for us to get projects completed. It's going to take a while for our new schools to be built. And what I keep hearing from educational officials is that there seems to be this fixation on the new schools are coming and not wanting to put so much resources into existing structures that will no longer be used. And I also think that we have to tread the line of ensuring that our students are safe.
Good. Thank you for those thoughts. Attorney Walker, how about the fact that this led the students now to protest? What are your thoughts on how they handled it?
I thought they handled it very well because they're the ones that are really having to deal with these issues at the school. And this occurred just a couple weeks after the school bus accident. So by that time, some of the students who are on a school bus were complex students. So I think it's just the myriad of things that have happened since the school year has started. I don't know how we could not have expected those students to protest. And in their protest, they shared additional information. My niece goes to that school, and I had no idea that she has to pay for drinking water. She has to purchase drinking water from the school. And in watching the protest and speaking to my own niece and her explaining to me, yes, it's been like that for a while. The water coming out of the drinking water fountain is brown. We have to pay for it. So there's just a series of issues that I think these students were tolerating. And that ceiling fan falling and injuring one of their friends or someone that goes to school with them, I believe was the last straw. And at that point, they had no choice but to protest.
Yes, thank you for that. Jamila, could you weigh in also on this issue of the falling ceiling fan?
Well, as somebody who worked on legislation to be able to address the issues with school maintenance, I was completely disheartened when I was in the middle of a work meeting and we got the picture. It speaks to the fact of us not taking things as priority. Legislation was passed in the 35th legislature in 2023 that created a Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance for the sole purpose of, making sure that the Department of Education officials proper were focused on education and student results and student achievement. And we created within the legislature, the legislature passed the bill that created this structure to take care of maintenance. It was funded. And the law is very clear. The funds were for school repairs and maintenance for those projects that were not federally funded. And so monies were appropriated. The legislature did what they were supposed to do. And that's the institution where I work. And so when you saw that, it was very disheartening because everybody says the senators need to do their job. And as somebody who works in the institution, I can speak to the fact that they attempted to address this issue. And it took a long time for a director to be named. And when he was named mid-summer when school repairs should be done during the summer. And so there was clearly no transition plan. And so I just think that moving forward, we need to support the Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance, and they have to get those maintenance projects moving and make sure that the schools are safe for our students, our teachers, faculty, and everybody who goes and
thank you for those
attends any of our school campuses.
Thank you for those thoughts. I want to go back to Attorney Walker because she mentioned how she was, she gets personally involved in this because she has nieces who go to these schools. And I'd like to hear her impressions on the aftermath of the accident, the school bus accident that she mentioned briefly.
Well, that morning I received a call from one of my nieces who was on the school bus. And she called me to ask me to pick her up to take her to the hospital because there was an accident. And after the accident, some students were taken to school, and the ones who felt pain immediately after the accident were instructed to stay on the bus, and that an ambulance was being sent, and they had waited for 40 minutes and the ambulance never arrived. So when I received the call from her, I immediately headed towards the area where the accident occurred. And on the way there, she explained that there were at least 3 other children who were at that time unable to reach their parents. And she asked if I could also take them to the hospital, which I said, yes. That my initial reaction, of course, was to say yes. So I got there. I parked in between the bus and the police car that was there, with the police officer standing there. And I came out of the car. My niece and the other children came off the bus, and I took them straight to the hospital.
So let me put a pin on that. I just would like to know, was there a communication lapse? Why is it that you were so highly involved and I'm not hearing enough about what school officials or education officials were, if they played a role in all of this? Because your nieces called you, who called the police, who called education, who called the school? Do you know?
Based on the conversations I've had with officials at education, they claim to not have known that the accident had occurred. My assumption is that they would have known, whether that's true or not, I can't say. What I do know is that when I got there were no school officials there. When I got there was the bus driver and there was a police officer.
And what was the time lapse?
The time lapse between
the call,
me receiving the call and arriving there was about 8 to 10 minutes.
And you got there
and
first.
The children had already been there for at least over 40 minutes waiting. So I took them to the hospital. They, were able to reach their parents. Their parents came to the hospital. And while at the hospital, I learned I had a second niece on the bus who was actually separated from her older sister and taken to school, and that she was experiencing neck pain. So I went to her school at John H. Woodson, signed her out of school, and, took her to the hospital for her neck pain. And she identified the 3 officials in the John H. Woodson school that she told she was experiencing neck pain and that she was in an accident, her neck hurt. She said who they were, and they sent her to class. So after an hour or two, the officials from education came. They began their investigation. They spoke to the parents. I let them know that Woodson was informed.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to get to that point as to what do you think needs to happen to improve the emergency protocols, because this time lapse that you're sharing with us is a bit concerning.
It was a few hours. And I think definitely there needs to be some sort of policy regarding the bus, because my position, as an aunt and as a lawyer, is that when those children enter the bus, they are actually under the custody and responsibility of the schools and the Department of Education, not the bus. The school has delegated a duty or responsibility to that bus company, but the schools, the education themselves are standing in loco parenti for those children. So there needs to be some sort of communication between the bus company or any vendor that's dealing with children in the Department of Education. That was the first issue. The second issue is, if there's an accident, you have to assess the children. If a student tells you that they're in pain, you don't just ignore it. You have to take action. And I think that was what was most disappointing, was that my niece told these officials that she was in pain, and they sent her to class and did nothing.
Thank you for that.
So hopefully the department has policies now to address those lapses in judgment.
Thank you for that, Attorney Walker. Let's move on to more health and safety issues when it comes to the schools. The mold and the heat prompted CHS students to walk out. You've been in the schools before, a former teacher. What are your thoughts about all of this?
Well, if you go back into like news records, mold has been an issue in our schools since the 1990s. And the documentation is there. When I was a teacher, I taught at Bowski Elementary School, and my classroom had a very big mold problem. And because the schools are departmentalized, my students had, thank God, the capacity to leave the classroom and go to another teacher's classroom in between the day. Whereas I was there all the time and I was regularly sick. I was calling out several times a month, and I would have like severe sinus infections, headaches, mental fatigue, mental fog. I think one of the things that the public doesn't quite understand, and I don't know that the Department of Education completely takes account of it, but I think it's important, is that a lot of those modulars, when they came with problems. So the modulars that came to Bowski, I remember that there were very strong scents coming out of the modulars that were so unpleasant that you had to plug in multiple air fresheners.
So you're talking about long-standing history, and the students just protested at CHS. Do you think their walkout was effective? You think they were heard? The response from education, was it sufficient?
If I were the student, I would have walked out longer, because I think that what happens with the Department of Education is they put Band-Aids on the problem, which is why last year the school year started with students protesting. This year the school year is starting again with students protesting along the lines of the same issues. And so I think that the Department of Education, I know Attorney Walker was just calling for them to implement more policy. I don't think we have a policy problem. I think the Department of Education has an accountability problem. They have an enforcement problem. They have a delegation problem. They have a system of checks and balances problem, because there are policies in place.
Ms. Russell, you obviously have to pay attention where you work. So what are your thoughts about this walkout at CHS, and do you think that the walkout from the students and teachers was effective?
Well, I think anytime students take action, it causes the community to pay attention. I think what should be said, though, is that a lot of times we have people in positions that want to retain the power of certain and oversight of certain functions. Again, I will say there is a Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance. Transfer those powers over to the entity that's now created to focus on that, and let them maintain and repair and make the renovations of all of the modulars, of all our school facilities, our playgrounds, until such time as the new construction begins. Money is there. They need to plan. There's a
You just said money is there, so
planning.
monies have been appropriated, but are money really there?
The money has been appropriated. The
Has it been
Department of
allotted?
Education, the Department of Education, the governor took a long time to name a director of the Bureau of School Construction and Maintenance. However, once he was named, what needed to happen was a transition plan needed to be put in place where he was brought up to speed on all of the issues that's happening at the various schools in the Virgin Islands. And then a plan. The law calls for a maintenance plan to be created within 180 days of submission. However, there wasn't a director. The Bureau didn't get stood up. It's now in the process of being stood up. So I am hoping that we see in very short order a plan on how he's going to address the maintenance and repairs and the low-hanging fruit that exists that can make our learning environment for our students much more pleasant and safe.
Thank you, Ms. Russell. So I'll continue with you because you are intimately involved, or were intimately involved in this legislation to create that position for the new Bureau School Construction and Maintenance Director. And there was an issue that came up recently where the qualifications for the executive director were being questioned because there was a discrepancy as to what the law says and what was posted and that person actually responded to.
Well, the question, the law is very clear. The law says that the executive director must be a licensed architect or engineer licensed in the Virgin Islands. However, the legislature does not implement laws. They make laws. And so when the job announcement went out, it went out incorrectly. I know for certain that the administration was notified that the job announcement was incorrect. We were told that it would be addressed. They have moved on and hired this individual who applied based on the job specification that was released. And now that it's done, I don't know that the legislature has standing to take any action. However, I hope that the individual that's been hired can do the job and make sure that he takes care of the maintenance and the construction of the schools. Because at the end, we need to make sure we create safe schools for our students to learn, and educators need to focus on student achievement.
I appreciate those thoughts. Attorney Walker, what are the legal ramifications? We know that the legislature does write the laws and the executive implements them. So now that this discrepancy has happened, what next?
Well, you know, the only legal ramifications occur if someone takes action. From everything that I have heard, not just locally, but from this individual's history working in the States, he actually seems to be an ideal selection outside of not meeting those qualifications in the legislature. And quite frankly, my concern at this point is that there's someone there who can get the job done, because when we fail to repair these schools, we send messages to our children that we don't care about them. And when, you know, if a child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Our failure to provide a safe environment for our children is the reason why we are now seeing crime amongst people who seem to get younger and younger, because they are making themselves heard. Thankfully, we have some students who protest, but the ones who don't protest are the ones who commit crime. So I just need an individual there who will turn this around, because when you turn it around, you improve our community as a whole.
I take your point about this particular individual, but do we establish legal precedents if we allow this to continue to happen?
You know, possibly, but until someone makes an objection that's legal to it, then honestly, this is the situation. So this is where we are. And at this point, my time is better spent supporting this individual so that he can perform and do a good job, as opposed to mounting a legal challenge to the circumstances under which he was hired.
So we go back to the whole issue of the Bureau effectively addressing the school maintenance issues. And I do recall Ms. Russell saying that it seems as if they're not passing the reins completely. Is that what I understood, Ms. Russell?
If you listen to the hearing, it seemed, you know, under testimony, it was stated that there was no transition. There was no transition meetings. There hasn't been any discussions as a voter. If I take myself outside of my work and look at it as a voter, I have to question, why wasn't a transition done? What is the purpose? We need to have if you hire somebody for the job, you need to give them all the tools that they need to be able to succeed in the job. Now, am I upset that the law wasn't followed to the letter of the law? Of course, because I work in the institution that writes the law. However, as a parent, I want that person be given all the tools that he needs to succeed. And as a resident of this Virgin Islands, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, and I'm going to support him as he moves the Bureau forward. But I do think, based on testimony, that there wasn't a transition. A transition needs to happen, and we need to be able to give the Bureau the ability to function as intended by Act 8717.
Excellent points. Thank you so much for your thoughts on that issue. Shifting to another important issue concerning the Department of Education, a long-promised report on sexual abuse reporting in the public school system has just been released by Government House. The review was commissioned after allegations of unreported abuse by a school official, likely concerning former coach Bruce Smith, who was sentenced to 35 years for child sexual exploitation. Senator Maurice James wrote a letter to Attorney General Gordon Ray questioning why no school officials were prosecuted, but the AG stated that the potential charges are now time-barred by the statute of limitations. Let's dive into the report, Ms. Carrard. It's been a long, long time coming for this report to be released, and now we're told that statutes of limitations have passed. So what are your thoughts about the length of time that it took? What are your thoughts about the content of the report?
I think that it is an incredible injustice to the victims. I think that when people are working in a school, it's expected of them that they are going to preserve and protect children and their dignity and their health. As for the report, I feel a little disappointed, to be honest, because back in 2007, we saw an instance where there was a Department of Education employee in St. Croix that had abused a 10-year-old student. And I would think that a lot of the protocol they're talking about in this report would have already been in place. One of the things they mentioned was that there would be an implementation of a mandatory reporter policy, which left me confused personally because I went into the Department of Education knowing that I was a mandated reporter. It's what you learn in college when you're getting your degree. And it was also strange to me that that policy wasn't already implemented into the school system.
Did you receive orientation on that as well?
No, I never got any training, and it wasn't something that was outwardly discussed. If I didn't go and ask my school counselor what the protocol was when I had concerns, then I didn't outwardly have that information.
So what do you think, Jamila, Ms. Russell, what do you think about the timing of it in terms of running the clock? Do you think it could have possibly been done on purpose? That's what some would think.
No, I don't think so at all. I think that the investigation portion, the laws are clear: misdemeanor 1 year to bring charges, felonies 3 years. Maybe our laws need to catch up. Maybe we need to remove the statute of limitations for certain crimes within the Virgin Islands. But the laws they stand. I think the investigation that occurred, I think based on what I read, some of those school officials would have the time would have passed for charges to be brought against them. I am a little bit upset, and I've said this before right here on this show, where the outcry from the community, the outrage hasn't been to the level that I expected. And I think it's because it's been abuse against young men. And that speaks to the taboo we find here in the Caribbean when it comes to male-on-male crimes. And so as a boy mom, this impacted me, and I was very outraged. And the fact that the rest of the community isn't as upset by these charges and by the lack of enforcement by the Department of Education, still to this day befuddles me, confuses me, angers me, and I'm trying to process my emotions as it comes to how the Department of Education handled this case with Bruce Smith.
I understand and I feel you. Attorney Walker, from the justice or lack thereof, I mean, what do the students and their parents have to look forward to in terms of, well, is this a closed case? The statutes of limitations have run out. Is there any way that they can seek justice other than this?
The AG nominee, Attorney Ray, explained in his response to Senator James's letter that, listen, while we may not be legally able to prosecute anyone for failing to report or for any of the crimes associated with what this individual did, there's nothing that precludes the department itself to institute administrative actions. And I have to completely agree with Ms. Russell. The response or lack thereof from education regarding some very serious issues is what's really troubling. You know, the Department of Education didn't release this report, the governor did, and thank God he did. And the question is, why did he have to release it as opposed to the department itself? And now that you have an actual, for all intents and purposes, legal opinion saying that nothing precludes you from investigating or taking this information to determine whether administrative action should be taken, is that something that the department is even considering and exploring? Because it should.
And good point, Ms. Corral. What do you think? I mean, you've been in the system. Do you think that this is something new that education officials fail to heed the importance of the moment and to act so that the students feel that somebody's actually protecting them.
I completely agree with Attorney Walker. I think that we keep kicking the can down the road for just about every issue. And I'm disheartened, like when you consider our children being our future and we keep wanting them to come out there and vote and get involved, our children don't feel like we care. And by all intents and purposes, they're absolutely right because their actions prove otherwise. And this is a failing of the Department of Education. And it would be nice to see accountability and for us to figure out what accountability looks like, because I keep hearing that they're going to institute transparency and accountability, and their word and their actions do not mount or line up.
But we're seeing that the students are really taking an active part. So they're protesting. Do you think folks are actually encouraging them to the voting process because you speak up, but what happens after speaking up?
I think what we're going to see is those children are going to graduate and we're going to see huge amounts of brain drain happen in our territory. And it's unfortunate that our children are protesting because it should actually be their parents going out there with them protesting, because that is where real change happens. The children advocating for themselves. For me, the bar is low on the ground if that is what our expectation is of moving the needle forward for Virgin Islands policy and for a better education system for our students.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Russell, I would like to end this topic with you. When it comes to student protesting and student involvement, what are your thoughts about the fact that they're actually speaking up? I mean, I know you work for the institution, but I think it's really refreshing to know that our children are not just sitting quietly, that they're saying, listen, I'm here, listen to me.
As somebody who has
in just a few seconds, thanks.
Protested, as somebody who has been on the front lines by herself sometimes, protesting conditions and making the public aware, I am proud of the students. But like I said, and I will continue to say, change begins in the home. Our students, if our schools aren't prepared for students, our parents, teachers shouldn't be going into the schools. The parents of these students are the ones that get up every morning and send them to school, knowing that the schools are in deplorable conditions. Parents need to stand beside their children. Parents need to make their voices heard. Again, I'm a parent of boys, and I have yet to hear any PTA issue a statement regarding Bruce Smith. You want to know what accountability looks like? Accountability looks like the Department of Education firing every administrator that was involved, that was that a complaint was made to, that took no action.
On that note, you made some compelling statements. All of you were very engaging, and I thank you all for your participation. But that's all the show we have for you today. Be sure to tune in next Sunday at 1 p.m. for an all-new episode of Comes with the Territory. In the meantime, for your news updates, tune in to the WTJX newsfeed on weekdays at 5 p.m. on 93.1 FM or by downloading the WTJX app. I'm Jeanette Millen-Young. For all of us here at WTJX Channel 12, take care.